All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Joel Rozin. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and I want to welcome you back to another edition of your Adrenal Fix. I'm really excited to announce our special guest, Jason Rozin. He's got a wealth of information in the holistic field as it pertains to nutrition and clinical care management and designing protocols. And I'm really excited. We could probably do about 5 of these podcasts, Jason. I probably will. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Dr. Rozin, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. And I know we've been wanting to do this for a while, so I'm so glad that we're finally getting it done. And I hope, like you said, it's one of many.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about you, Jason. I met you probably, I'd say maybe 6 or 7 years ago at a nutritional conference, and that was with Premier Research Labs. But tell us a little bit about your story, about how you got into what you got into and what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and basically it comes down to having an experience. So I think that's what happens to a lot of us when we go into this path. So basically, out of college, I was into banking. So that was my job for, oh boy, probably 15 years or so. I was good at it, but I absolutely hated it. I was just a capitalist warmonger. I was out for the almighty dollar. I was just, living hard on the weekends and just not living a fulfilling life, absolutely miserable. And got into my early 30s. And unfortunately, my father was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma. And they put him in a clinical trial on this new experimental chemo that they thought could be fairly promising. Needless to say, it didn't go too well. And then I got to see what traditional chemo looks like, and especially some of these PICs they put in ICUs and things like that. And needless to say, my father didn't make it more than a year. And I was just like, at about the same time, I was starting to come to my own crossroads with, this is not the lifestyle I want to live. I want to become healthier. I started reading about natural healthcare, and I was starting to see chiropractors and getting muscle testing done, and started taking products from Premier Research Labs. And, started taking a lot better care of myself. And as soon as my dad passed, I was just like, wow, this is just insane, the way that people treat chronic disease in this country, and well, in the world, as a matter of that fact. So I decided at that point, after my dad passed away, that it was time for me to get my act together and get married. So sorry, this story might drag on a little bit, but it gets pretty good. So I hopped onto eHarmony, and with just the whole mission, like, I'm going to find a really good wife. I'm going to try to go out of my own circles. So I ended up meeting this girl who was working in Minneapolis on an expat contract. She was from Britain. 13 months later, we were married. So she's currently my wife. We'll be married 10 years come this December. So that's pretty exciting. So she was very supportive of career change. She's got a master's in psychology and an MBA. So she's good at helping people find, things that were the right fit. And she knew I was miserable in my job. So she's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to be a chiropractor. And she's like, well, we're pregnant, with our first child, and you want to go $150,000 in debt. Maybe there's a solution around you going that direction, so you can still fulfill your dreams and your want to find a vocation. So she's like, this company you're always going on about, this Premier Research Labs that you're always screaming and hollering about, why can't you see if you can get a job with them? So needless to say, I think every day for 30 days, I called the doctor who was representing the region in Minnesota, and just relentlessly hounded him, telling him that they needed an outside rep representing them outside of just Austin, Texas, which where the company was based. And finally, one day he calls me. I'm on the way to work, and he's like, Dr. Marshall, who's the CEO of the company, is going to be in the airport, Minneapolis airport today at like 4:15. He has got a layover till 6. Go to the airport, find him. Here's his flight number. And after that, don't call me again. So right. I call my wife. I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get in the airport? She's like, oh, you can just rent a room in there and you can get a pass through security. So I go and I hold up a sign like a limo driver, Dr. Marshall here. And, he's this brash New Yorker. He comes out, he's like, oh, you're this Jason guy that won't leave us alone. He's like, I don't know why I'm bothering wasting my time with you. He's like, you're never going to learn how to run a test kit and do kinesiology. So tell me why you're wasting my time. So then I just kind of went into this crazy zone. I don't even remember what I said, but needless to say, an hour later, he offered me a job. So The rest was kind of history. So I spent a good 6-7 years with Premier Research Labs mastering energetic medicine. He taught me a ton about biochemistry, and I became a diplomate in quantum reflex analysis. And then about 3 years ago, I met my current business partner, who is called Troy Opperley. And he's another maniac, you know, climbed Mount Everest and does all these crazy things with his health. And we just hit it off. And he's really into enzymes and systemic enzymes, and also into quantum energy and things like that. So I started playing around with some of his supplements, and I was just blown away at how I could get really amazing results with people and dropping the load of pills that they needed to take. Because that was the hardest thing for me, was the protocol loads for people. And I'm sure, and people out there that have been on supplemental protocols, you and me both know how some of those can get, you know, taking 30, 40 pills of something. So needless to say, that's kind of where that led me to where I am now with working with Troy. Just absolutely love enzymes and, you know, what they can do, the broad range of things that they can cover, and how they can make things simpler and more approachable for people to, as, you know, this healthcare revolution motors on.
That's awesome. Awesome story. I didn't know that story about you, but there's definitely a lesson in persistency, right? And trying to get what you want. So the questions I would ask is, you know, sort of as a lay person, I'd be a little bit skeptical. I was a little bit skeptical myself, in the sense that I'm from a traditional medical family. And even though I was sort of the proverbial black sheep of the family, I still had that, you know, that mentality of, I like the Western-based medicine with testing, although I don't like the medications and so forth. And then I got introduced to Premier Research Labs and Dr. Marshall, and was just blown away by his information. And so tell us about how the energy works with living source tissue, like living source nutrition, and how that achieves a coherence with the body, and why that's so effective in your experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. Outstanding question. And we do work with tons of our doctors do labs, and, you know, I absolutely love labs. And I know you do tons of labs too. So we don't just do all muscle testing, you know, it's a small portion of our patient base. But so basically a cell has a coherent frequency, and it's produced by what we know is called cold light or bioluminescence. And we know that is produced by an enzyme. You can look this up on Wikipedia. The first time that this was actually discovered was in a firefly. They wanted to discover why fireflies made this glowing light that seemed to be a different spectrum than other lights that were observed. And they found it was, you know, created by an enzyme. And they named that enzyme luciferase, who is, in the Bible, they call him the light bearer. So that's why they named that first, you know, enzyme that they found that produced light, luciferase. And ever since then, we found that all enzymes produce this coherent light. And that is why your cells are able to communicate so quickly with each other throughout your gene deck. So like at the speed of light, your cell can talk to any other cell in your body, and it's through this chain of biphotonic light or bioluminescence. Now, when this bioluminescence becomes jumbled or incoherent, the cell-to-cell communication breaks down. And that's when things like low-grade infections can take up residence intracellularly. They can cause, you know, jam-ups in the way that your nervous system works, and just set the stage for disease. So that's just one of the, I think, the really cool things about, you know, Eastern medicine that are being now finally proven by science, that they've been saying for, you know, millennia, that now we're like, oh, okay, there's some real science behind this, and we're just, you know, cracking the frontier on that. So it's pretty cool stuff. They've even been able to observe at UC Irvine. I'm currently studying for my naturopathic doctorate, and one of my professors is called Gaetan Chevalier. And he did a research project at UC Irvine. He's a quantum physicist, on how they can observe different light discoherences in the body and use it for early pre-cancer detection. And that study is going quite well. So it's going to be a nice non-invasive way to screen your body for pre-cancer and cancer.
That's really cool. So then, as far as the enzymes go, because we do a lot of work with, you know, the genetic testing, and that's what we're looking at, the gene deck and how well do they code for enzymes. But back to the nutrition. So now
Yes.
we know that we have this coherence field and that we're basically light bearers. And then we eat light, or we eat food that is, certain spectrums of the frequencies of light.
Yep.
But, tell us a little bit more about how that works in terms of having good nutritional products and bad nutritional products.
Yeah, it's just kind of fun to think of, like, the way I think, like you said it, you just hit the nail on the head saying that we're like light eaters. So if you think about it, let's say, you've got this amazing soil from like Jerusalem, like 300 years ago, and it grows this beautiful, cabbage. And can you imagine like how much light would be around there? Or like they talk about in the ancient text, people, putting just one bushel of grapes over their shoulders. So to me, there must have been a lot of light in food like that, and then compare that to like a McDonald's hamburger or something like that. So if you're consuming food that is really, really from a live, living source, really clean soil, the fresher and quicker you can get to it. If your gene deck can handle fermentation, I know that gives histamine issues to a lot of people, unfortunately. That's going to have a lot of light in it because there's going to be extra enzymes. So that's just the way I look at it. The brighter the food, even just looking at it, you can tell that is going to have more coherence to it. So if you were able to handle like a really good raw food diet that sat well with your genetics and everything, then you probably wouldn't, need supplements. And if you had access to really good soil, you definitely probably would need very few supplements. So hopefully that.
Right, definitely.
Yeah, that's some light on that.
Yeah, good one. So I know, like, I'm have a big sort of man crush, as I say, on Dr. Marshall. I listen to all of his stuff. And so, he says, we really weren't engineered to eat, cooked food that's cooked over a boiling point. And, with the demographic that I work with, Jason, we look at it as an adrenal fatigued or HPA axis dysfunction. But upstream from that is the fact that the cells aren't making energy at the mitochondrial level in the way that they need to. So let's talk about a little bit about that, because I don't think people realize that ultimately, when you eat cooked foods or foods that are, preserved, or they're synthetic, or they're GMO'd, or they're sprayed, or chemicals, or they have lots of bacteria on it, and we're not engineered to eat this, ultimately we lose the capacity to digest the food. So tell us a little bit about the role that hydrochloric acid plays in that, and then we can transition into the enzymes that you guys produce.
Yeah. Okay. So like one thing that I always like to mention, like you talked about, is the less the food is cooked, the less HCl your body is going to demand to digest it. So if you look at how much we cook food here, just in general, right there, you're taking a massive hit of HCl. Now you add some of these other things on top of it, you're going to increase your demand for HCl for sure. And then you look at, how the food is handled, by the time it actually gets from the farm to the table, there's going to be a lot of, agents that can get into it, parasites, different types of bacteria. And then your body is going to notice that is in the food. So it's going to demand even more disinfection from your body, from your stomach, with your first line of defense against these things, which is hydrochloric acid. Now, from a genetic perspective, we know that one of the, like, methyl donation is huge to keep your positive genes expressed and, your negative genes, unexpressed, deacetylation, acetylation. And the chemical name for HCl is trimethylglycine. So it's got 3 methyl groups to help donate to the DNA. So it's absolutely critical to have HCl reserves in order to methylate properly, so that your genes, stay clean, your positive genes stay expressed. From a nutritional value, of course, tons of other things can come into play there. And then also just to keep your digestive system from getting overwhelmed. If you can't break down the food completely, without even talking about enzymes yet, your hepatoportal system, which is, the way your colon stays clean from rotting food and sending it into the liver for detoxification. And you're going to have rotting food in your system from eating too much, not having enough HCl, not having enough enzymes. It's going to overwhelm your liver, which is another one of your huge friends for MTHFR and all these other fun things. that are critically important. But if you're not digesting your food and not breaking it down enough with hydrochloric acid, that hepatoportal system is going to be backed up 24/7 again and again and again. You can do liver flushes, liver cleanses, take all these awesome supplements. But if that constant hit is there, you're just going to have, your body is just going to be in a constant state of thinking about digestion instead of thinking about all the other wonderful things that it could be doing. So that's just one or a couple of the highlights of HCl. I know Dr. Marshall used to think that, or believe, and I believe him as well, that if we had our HCl reserves, and by eating, you know, things close to raw as possible and not demanding an overload of HCl from the body, that HCl would go to the organs at night. So your body would have enough HCl to be like, okay, digestion's in order. We don't need to really do anything now. Let's make some HCl and disinfect the organs to keep them nice and clean. And if we get a tick bite or something like that, that the HCl would rush to the site. The body would have extra stores of it to rush it to the site to prevent the Lyme or whatever from taking over the body. So as we see things like that just on the rise, Lyme's disease just seems to be going crazy. There could be a lot of different reasons for that. I think hydrochloric acid deficiency plays a large role in that. And also, I forgot what else I was going to say about HCl, but you know, we could go on probably for about 3 years about it. But those are like some of the really key points that come to mind.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, not only that, so, you know, just to summarize, if we're eating foods that are not easy for our digestive processes to break down, we deplete ourselves of HCl, we deplete ourselves of methyl groups. And like Dr. Marshall would say, is up to 1/3 of our life is cut short because we burn, you know, an extra 1/3 of our methyl groups to digest these foods.
Yeah.
But the other thing that he said, which is interesting, and you just sort of mentioned as well, so now you don't have this extra HCl to disinfect, so you're more prone to viruses and pathogens in the environment, but then also you're more prone to rotting food in the GI lining, you're more prone to breakdown of gut lining, so now you have permeability, your immune system is overacting, so now you react to foods that you shouldn't have reacted to. But on top of that, when you're losing your methyl groups, and like you said, the deacetylation, so now you're expressing these bad genes, and now we also know that 30% of the gene deck can express a virus, so you're not even getting a virus from, you know, or a pathogen from the outside. So you have this kind of quadruple whammy where now you can get more infections from the environment and or your own gene deck expressing the virus. Correct?
Yes, exactly. Same with oncogenes, same with cancer genes. Just another. When people talk anti-aging, that's always one of the first things I want to talk about, because I'm like, it protects you from you.
Right. And yet you have this $1 trillion industry of, you know, of antacids for people that, you know, have this reflux problem, which is just rotting food, that more than actual, you know, hydrochloric acid being too high. But anyway, so let's switch it up a little bit. So, you know, let's get into enzymes, because I don't think people understand the importance of enzymes with the way that they could be utilized from a systemic point of view and from, you know, from holding the digestive processes so that you're creating a nice biome and so forth. So let's talk a little bit about just sort of your foundational stuff. So from US Enzymes, which is such a great product and a great company, you have the HCl, of course, but tell us a little bit about the way that you guys ferment them in sort of a mineral blend, because I think people need to hear about that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And that, just to kind of start maybe with the foundation on the enzyme side too, I remembered what I was going to say before, is all 8 allergens are proteins. So we know that we need HCl and enzymes to break down proteins. So just anyone that has been around along for more than, or alive for more than 30, 35 years, remembers when we were kids, there was barely anybody that has allergies. Now, you know, in my son's school, you can't even, you know, bring a peanut near the place, or the place goes into meltdown. So it just shows you how our enzyme and HCl reserves are definitely affecting us, and from an allergy standpoint, which you nailed as well with the permeability and stuff, is very nicely. So with enzymes, from a digestive standpoint, you've got about 3 basic types. So you've got an animal-based enzyme, which is your basic, like your pepsin. And then you've got a plant-based enzymes, which are like your bromelain, your papain. And then you have these enzymes that are called microbial or fermented enzymes. Now, these enzymes are just made through fermentation. So there's no fermented byproduct. So it's not like getting an enzyme through a kombucha or something like that. All of that stuff is filtered out. So people that have histamine issues, they have absolutely no worry taking a product like this. So when you take a look at these animal-based enzymes, they come from pigs, and they do a wonderful job of breaking protein down, but they don't do such a great job with carbs, with fats, and with sugars, whereas your plant-based enzymes do a really good job with, sugars and carbs, but they don't do a very good job with proteins. And then your fermented enzymes do a wonderful job with everything: fats, proteins, carbs, sugars. And they do it at a pH range of 1 to 12, which is what you're going to see anywhere in the human body. The pH range of a animal-based enzyme is very, very low. The pH range of a plant-based enzyme is more in the middle. But the fermented enzymes can work and break proteins and things into amino acids at all pH ranges. So that's primarily what we use at US Enzymes. And we source those only from 100-year-old companies out of Japan and South Korea. We don't source anything outside of India or some of these other places where they've had recall issues and some things like that. These places are like basically as clean as a pharmaceutical drug company. So, sourcing is a huge deal for us. And that's, I guess, where we start. And then you'll see our bottles are this fancy, blue looking. Oh, I thought you were going to grab one.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, no,
that's okay. But yeah, so when that's just not to make it look pretty. It's because especially living source nutrients and enzymes in particular, they're alive. That's why they have these crazy activity units on the back of the label. And if they don't, that's a caution sign to not buy that enzyme, because if they're putting like proprietary blend of enzyme or something like that on a bottle, that usually means they don't want to let you know the activity units on there. So that probably means that it's pretty low. It's to keep the different nanometers of light that can degrade living things, especially enzymes and probiotics, to deflect that light out. So that's another big reason. That's the biggest reason we use the blue violet type glass. And then we flush it with nitrogen to keep as much air out of the bottle as we possibly can, which is something we always do at Premier Research Labs as well. So from like a quality perspective, that's where we kind of start. And then again, going back to what—
interrupt real quick.
Go ahead.
You guys do the spectrometers to look at the impurities of it as well, to sort of digitally fingerprint it?
Yeah, we do. Yep, HPLC digital fingerprint of every single thing. We have our own lab. We make our own products, which is becoming a rarity these days. Yeah, we test absolutely everything. And it's really hard just to even become a qualified supplier of us. And even once you are, we still will test everything that you send us.
Right.
So
I think that's cool.
Point. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So go on. So as far as the next layer, so once that quality control is there, now let's talk about the astrozyme and the fermentation and the minerals, because I think that's key, especially for adrenals, right? So let's talk about that.
Huge. Okay. So enzymes, we know, they're critical for transporting things in and out of cells. And that's right there where mitochondrial fatigue can begin in a lot of people. And to make enzymes work at their peak level, you need minerals to activate them. So Troy, my business partner, the crazy maniac that climbs all these mountains, is also an energy head and into Buckminster Fuller and the double dodecahedron and some of these crazy funky shapes that actually do things. And so he's like us. He's like, okay, this is really cool and energy and feel it, but let's prove it with let's get some science behind it. So he's like, all right, there's a lot of different minerals that share a shape of a hedron, and an enzyme happens to have— enzymes are shaped like hedrons. So he's like, if a dodecahedron is the foundation of all this geometrics that make energy function, why don't we combine them together and see if they make a difference on the way things are, the way body reacts with it. So we did a study with New Live Sciences, and they do a lot of studies for pharmaceutical companies with a KCO2 cell, which is what you do if you're going to test a drug. And we just did a test with basic enzymes, and then we repeated the test with the same enzymes, and we added astrozyme, and we got a profound result. So astrozyme it's like the thing that we have that's patented that we add to our enzymes to enhance them, and we add it to a lot of our products. It's eventually going to be in all of our products to enhance how effective that they are. So what happened is we saw in just protein digestion, which is critical, the faster we can break this protein down, the quicker we're going to avoid things like autoimmunity and set the stage for all this acidity and stuff like that. How quickly the body broke the protein down went up by over 35%, and how quickly the body converted protein into the amino acids went up by 35%. So that was absolutely insane. And then also the amount of protein that was broken into amino acids went up by an additional 40%, just by adding this mineral blend to the enzyme. So it's just kind of crazy to think that, you know, adding a few little bit of minerals that have this funky shape could make such a result into the effectiveness of the product, which again means you're getting way more out of your product, you're getting more of that biphotonic light, and you're needing to take less of it to get a therapeutic result. And again, the minerals are just critical for transporting materials in and out of cells and breaking down the proteins that heavy metal is going to attach to, or a virus or a bacteria or a parasite to hide from your immune system. And then also just keeping these things at bay in the bloodstream so your immune system constantly isn't just worrying about them and not focusing on, you know, the overall picture.
Right. And just sort of following up from, if you're not digesting your food and you don't have that HCl reserve there, and you have fermentation and leaky gut, and you lose your brush borders, now you have no mineral deposits across there, and now you have heavy metals and so forth, and it becomes a vicious, you know, cycle. So as far as the astrozyme goes, I'm just kind of curious, because I don't know for myself, the fermentation process with the astrozyme, which is the minerals, how do you guys do that? I'm kind of curious.
Well, the minerals themselves are not fermented. The enzymes are fermented. So what happens is it's different for each enzyme. So what happens is we'll use a media and create a fermentation process, like a rice media or something like that. It depends on whatever it is, or a really a non-toxic form of Aspergillus niger is another popular one. And the fermentation just creates enzymes so quickly, just like, you know, like kombucha, like people love to drink that because it's loaded with enzymes and good bacteria, but it's also loaded with a lot of histamine byproducts, which gives some people fits. And then then it's filtered till all that's left is just a pure enzyme, and the enzyme that was formed through fermentation, through the way it's supposed to be formed, not pressed out of a, you know, pig's pancreas. So it contains all that more, the brightness, the light, and the way that the ultimate way to get, you know, enzymes.
Right. Okay. So now we have two kinds of enzymes, which you've, you know, kind of gone over with me a couple times, where we have the digestive, you know, purposes, and then we have sort of a systemic purpose. So just for the adrenal fatigued patient who's exhausted and burnt out, and, you know, with stress and adrenal problems, they lose their secretory IgA, so they don't have that nice lining. So now they even have that double whammy. So what would you recommend in terms of, okay, I just want to, you know, slowly maybe get some fermented foods. Dr. Marshall was big into helping some of those challenged people getting just some fermented foods and maybe helping them in that capacity. But now that you have the fermentation in those enzymes that you guys have, what would you suggest just in terms of the digestive purposes?
Yeah, so I always say, you know, if people want to know what supplements should I take, and this is pretty much regardless of what you have, unless you're like late stage cancer or you've got nasty infection presenting itself. But a basic chronic illness, adrenal, you know, exhaustion, you know, thyroiditis of all types, you know, neuropathy, diabetes, is you want to start with a digestive enzyme. And one question that will come up, I'm sure, and a bunch of people probably already are dying to ask it, is, I make enzymes, don't I, you know, am I going to shut my body's ability down to make enzymes? And the answer to that is absolutely not. If that was the case, every time you ate some pineapple, your body wouldn't make enzymes. But and this was proven at Columbia University, there's a law called the adaptive law of secretion, that the body reveres enzymes so much that it will not produce a single extra one for a job, because it wants to save, because you do have a limited supply. So by taking enzymes, what you're doing is you're just kind of evening the playing field, or building up a reserve in the bank. So it's like, staying in the, in the positive and the negative in your bank account. Every time you eat food and don't take enzymes, you're going into the negative. If you eat, and that's a cooked food meal, you eat cooked food meal and you take some enzymes, you're going to stay at least even. If you start eating raw food and fermented foods, then you're going to start building up, a reserve, and you're going to start building up, some money in the savings account. So I always say just start there. And since our enzymes are so potent and so diverse, there's 23 different enzymes in just our digestive blend, that just one is all the patient needs. And, not to be an infomercial here, but our bottles have 93 capsules in them because there's 31 days in most months, crazy Troy. And they're designed for you to be able to take a single pill at a meal to get as much as you need.
So there's 93. That's awesome. I love that aspect. I love explaining, there's 93 in there because there's 31 days in a month. You need to, I love that idea. So would you say then, Jason, that the digestime which is the one you just mentioned, is suffice on its own? Or do I need, given that we just mentioned HCl, I need both of those? Or I'm going to be able to digest the HCl with the digestime, or I'm going to be able to digest proteins with the digestime?
Yes, you're definitely going to be able to digest proteins. So if I could only afford one, I would go, and it's hard between HCl and digestime. It's really, really close. The number 2 enzyme or supplement behind that I would tell people to take is hydrochloric acid, especially if you're older. If you're younger, you still have a shot of really making a lot of good hydrochloric acid, which from Dr. Marshall. You just got to make sure you consume a really good amount of healthy, unrefined, air-dried salt. And,
right.
There's good sources of that out there. PRL makes a couple outstanding versions. And especially the young athletes, because one thing I do like to see, since we're getting into some of the systemic stuff as we're flowing through, is you'll see like people in their 40s that'll have diabetes or have these weird blood sugar problems or kidney issues that seem like they should just be in amazing health. They're taking awesome care of themselves with exercise. They're at the perfect body weight, and they eat just fantastically well. And yet they can't get these things under control. And the theory of Dr. Marshall, which I learned from him that I'm a firm believer in, is that when they were young, they would go out and they'd sweat so much just from playing out in the sun all day. Then they would go eat some cooked food that was that had like an agent called nanobacteria in it, which could also be just a form of H. pylori, or we're trying to figure out, what that really is. There's, debates and a lot of circles there, but that because you couldn't make HCl because you sweated out all your salt that day, that this nanobacteria had a chance to bypass the stomach and carte blanche into your circulatory tree, and then eventually get in your pancreas or your kidneys or something like that, and cause an issue with the pancreas and making blood and balancing blood sugar. So these infections, low-grade infections, set the the stage for these diseases down the road, when it just doesn't make sense that this person would have type 2 diabetes or even adrenal fatigue or something like that. And it's a lot of times related to these low-grade infections that have been there forever since they were kids. And just now they're starting the chance to really take up residence and overtake tissue because you're getting older, more stressed, and your digestive system's getting overwhelmed, and they've just been sitting there kind of waiting.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good connection in terms of the people that we work with, and we listen to Dr. Marshall. The 3 roles that the adrenals play is obviously with energy and mineral concentration, keeping your fluid levels balanced and settling inflammation. The thing is that, when we're trying to drink half your body weight in ounces every day, and then you put on top of that, a cup of coffee, and Dr. Marshall's theory was for every cup of coffee, another 32 ounces. So, plus the athletes are sweating, so you can add more water on top of that. It's a copious amounts of water, and they're dehydrated. you know? So not
Yes.
only are they dehydrated and you're having these, you know, the adrenals being taxed and shriveling up on the vine there, but now you're decreasing your digestive processes, and nanobacterias and other forms of pathogens are coming in. And now, you know, the secretory IgA that lines the lining
Yep.
is, you know, creating a sort of a perfect storm for, you know, an HPA axis dysfunction. So
Yep.
the other thing we mentioned, so both, okay, so just to summarize, the digestime and all your enzymes lines end with the XYME, so it kind of gives it a fancy name like digestive enzymes, but digestime or
Right.
HCl, you know, HCl zyme would be to take the digestime, which is going to be good for maybe the younger person who is still secreting their own HCl, or maybe they're getting a good source of unrefined pink salt. And they're also, for the older person, probably both those two.
Yes.
But and I would love to get into the systemic stuff, but we're not going to have enough time. And I definitely just want to pick your brain as much as I can. And I will have you on again. But you were
Sure.
mentioning, I don't utilize enough, in all honesty, is the sun spectrum. And while we're talking about the digestive processes of the biome, tell us about sun spectrum and why it's such an all-star with what you guys do.
Okay, yeah. For number one, to tie it into especially people with adrenals, as you're talking about their adrenals shriveling away, is if your adrenals don't balance fluid, you die. And one of the most taxing things it has to do is balance fluid in your colon. And an absolute ace for that is what's called butyrate. And in sun spectrum, there is a product called sun fiber that is already pre-fermented into butyrate, which it'll line your intestinal lining with beautiful permeability. It'll start to heal in these gap junctions, and it'll give the adrenals just a huge, huge break in having to overwork and just focus so much on fluid balance. So it's a gut healing product, which is a very, very popular term these days, that is able to do so without using L-glutamine. And we could talk a lot about L-glutamine. L-glutamine is actually probably going to be banned soon, because it's been studied and synthesized into a drug they're going to use to treat sickle cell anemia. So, you know, the FDA in their infinite wisdom allows drug companies to pull supplements off that they've synthesized. So unfortunately, glutamine is probably going to be gone. Might take a few years, but I don't want to freak anyone out. But L-glutamine is also not without its issues. It drives mTOR, which we know is a pathway when you talk about genes and stuff like that, if you have cancer or you're predisposed to cancer, it can increase your risk and all kinds of other inflammatory processes. So you're able to get the benefits of a gut healing product here without L-glutamine. And then it has a curcumin in it that is called C3 reduct, that is, it's water soluble, and it has a half-life that's 3 times greater than taking like a curcumin. And it has a bioavailability that's 3 times greater than curcumin, which curcumin can be pretty hard to absorb. And that is huge, obviously, for inflammation. It'll help keep your gut in balance for dysbiosis and certain, you know, buggers that are going to take up residence in your gut. It's really good for, you know, lowering liver enzymes and things like that. So it's a huge gut liver player. And then you talked a lot about, you know, cellular energy and how critical that is in digestive function. We have a bioidentical Q10. So it's something that the body can use, not just a traditional CoQ10 that at a certain age you probably can't even convert. And then it has a low dose of a probiotic in it that has been proven to survive stomach acid and bile salts. So to slowly start putting some of the good guys back in as we sweep out some of the bad guys and set up the terrain of the digestive system, start to wash out the brush border cells so they start to function properly. So yeah, in a roundabout way, it's just an outstanding player for.
Yeah, I'm wondering why I haven't been using it more. As far as how is that taken?
Sun spectrum, the best way to take it is to just take it in 2 doses. So it comes in a scoop. It's all water soluble, so you don't have that orangey, stainy, you know, kind of issue that you would get with curcumin, and you don't have that taste issue. So the best way is just mix it in your favorite drink, as long as it's not hot or carbonated. because that's going to, carbonation is just it's going to make the drink go everywhere, and the heat will kill the probiotics. So just put it in your favorite drink and do a half a scoop in the morning and a half a scoop at night. If you're one of these people that can just do it once a day, just do it in the morning. I usually make myself a morning smoothie, and that just goes right in there, and that's when I take it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you know, just like nerding out on the butyrate too, there's additional research that's showing not only is it going to tighten up those junctions that are breaking down, it will actually help with the dendritic cell activation. So now you're not getting so much reactivity to certain foods that you shouldn't be reacting to. So that's what happens is you get that leaky gut, you get the dendritic cells presenting it to the, you know, to the antigen and that whole complex.
Making the food antibodies.
And you start to react to all these different types of foods. And now all of a sudden you're not reacting anymore. And people don't get that where, hey, I've had a food sensitivity test and I'm reacting to everything. And now I don't have any diversity in my microbiome on the one hand, and I'm making it even less diverse, and they never reintroduce the foods. And this is a strategy that would actually help them in that regards too. So
yes,
quite awesome
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, I got about 6 more minutes. So as far as we talked about, infections. And so one of the, major things that Dr. Marshall published, which is a great, you can still go on and do a search, and it's called the overlooked role of hidden infection in chronic illness. And it's an awesome.
Yes.
And neurodegeneration, correct.
Yeah.
And so we'll sort of give a little prelude to another talk, which we'll get right into that. So I guess, not to put you on the spot, but what would the systemic enzymes do from a physiology point of view that would help knock out those infections?
Okay, this is definitely a conversation we should do next topic, but I think I'll hit it just with kind of the best overview. Like in that paper, one of my favorite things, one of the best things I probably ever learned from Dr. Marshall was a lot of protocols will go after you have X infection, and they'll give you an antimicrobial for that, whether it's an antibiotic or an herbal, and then it'll come back, or another infection will present itself. And what's been kind of figured out is the reason that these infections really can't be taken down one at a time in most cases is because there's a biofilm. And in this biofilm, once it gets to a certain size, and a biofilm is like a sticky, incomplete piece of undigested food that could be stuck in your gut, or could stuck sometimes even your thyroid, your testicles, somewhere like that. Infective organisms can go inside of them and do they call it quorum sensing. In a sense, they exchange genes with each other, so that when the immune system starts to come after it, it can change to the other gene, and the immune system was already tagged for a certain antibody, and it's like, oh wait, I'm not looking for you, I'm looking for someone else, so it'll go right by it. So the critical thing for taking down these chronic low-grade infections and bringing the body back into balance is to break down biofilms. And there is, in my mind, nothing better that breaks down biofilms than systemic enzymes. Our best product for it is Therazyme, and then we have another one called Czyme, which is designed to break down mucus. But there's all kinds of different types of biofilms and different types of layers of them, and there's a lot of enzymes that are specific for taking down certain types of biofilm, like chitin is a favorite protective layer of yeast overgrowth and black mold, and chitinase is an enzyme that can help break that down. It's one of the few things that can do it. So systemic enzymes are wonderful for breaking down biofilms, and then just giving your immune system a clear picture of what's going on. It's like, oh, there's all kinds of these guys here. We need to make more antibodies for this, 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 and this. And you have a lot better chance of taking, a low-grade infection down. And rather than just pounding it with an herbal and making somebody sick and causing a Herxheimer reaction, a lot of times it goes a lot more smoothly when you use a systemic enzyme. It doesn't fire either side of the immune system, a Th1 or a Th2 response. So hopefully that sets the stage. And
what we'll do is I'll definitely, we'll get back, and sorry to interrupt, I'll definitely get back with you and say, hey, let's do this right away so that we're striking while the iron's hot. Just so I know, was that one with the Candida, is that the Cleanzyme product that you have?
Yes, that's the Cleanzyme. It's got a bunch of other things designed to help with mold, and it's yeast Candida's just an overall great antimicrobial, but its primary focus is getting after some of those guys. And then it's a antibacterial because it drops the oxygen magnesium in it, drops ozone throughout the digestive tract for 12 hours. A lot of oxygen magnesiums are only titrating for, sometimes 20 minutes, maybe a couple hours. The one we use goes 12, so it gets all the way through the system.
Super cool. So just to summarize, so that's what I love about you, Jason, is because you really help doctors too. And thank you so much for building protocols specific to patients. And I'm big into that. It's not just do this, 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 and this for everyone, but hey, this patient has this, 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 and this. What should we do? But to sort of summarize all of that, obviously keeping your water intake high and getting good, healthy salt to help replenish that, getting good digestive support, whether it's through a digestive enzyme or hydrochloric acid or both, helping the brush borders and the microbiome so that when you do go and do a systemic protocol and you bring a lot more of that excess debris to the kidney and the liver and the microbiome, it's not going to be overwhelmed, so to speak, and you're going to kick the ocean floor and stir up the hornet's nest, but you're actually going to support that, right? So, I always do this with my guests, and what I'll do is this podcast gets uploaded to a bunch of different places, from my website to iTunes to YouTube to all that kind of stuff. Is there anything that we can work on in terms of maybe giving the listeners a discount, like a link, like a 5% or some kind of discount, so that their first order, if they're interested, or some kind of package you and I will talk about that you can do for the listeners? I should have asked you this beforehand.
No, it's fine. You're not putting me on the spot at all. I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to do what you do. I really applaud, your efforts and your passion, and just the overall amount of love that you bring to the table. So, of course, we'll do something. I just need to clear it with my business partner, but we'll do something special for the listeners. Absolutely.
Awesome. I appreciate it. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate your time as well. And then definitely let's set up for part two. Part two will be going into the systemic enzyme role in busting hidden infections and neurodegeneration. Let's do that.
All kinds of really cool stuff. That's when it really gets fun.
Yeah. And you know what, you say I'm doing this altruistically, but I'm basically being selfish for my own knowledge so that I can, get all this information so I can learn from people. So in the guise of trying to help people. No, I like to help people and make sure that we have good outcomes. So Jason, I got to run. I want to thank you so much for doing this. And I look forward to our next meeting.
Thanks. Thank you to all your listeners. And thank you again, Dr. Rose.
Okay. Thanks, bud.
All right. Thanks, brother. All right. Bye-bye.